Guys, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD are coming. You heard it here first. Okay, maybe more like, you heard it here 994th. So, seeing as how Nintendo basically decided they don't want to do anything for Zelda's 40th anniversary, or at least that's what it seems like right now, I could do the usual thing where I question where all of these 40th anniversary leaks and rumors and clickbaity videos have come from. But instead, I thought it would be a little bit more fun to reminisce about one of the greatest franchises in history. Now, to be very clear, despite the fact that I am a massive Nintendo fan, for the games of course, not really the corporation, I have never actually considered myself a huge Zelda guy. I've played most of, if not all of the Zelda games through to completion. I've enjoyed and loved every single Zelda game that I have played, but unlike many other franchises that I enjoyed throughout my life, I don't really have an affinity for Zelda that started from childhood. This was largely because I didn't really determine which games I got to play when I was a kid. My dad was buying them for my older brother, and by default, by the time I started playing, we were just Mario, Donkey Kong, Sonic, basically big 2D platform type people. And then by the time we got to the Nintendo 64, most of the focus was on multiplayer gaming, especially because we were a big family, so I wasn't really getting that much TV time to play a game on my own. As a matter of fact, outside of minor sessions here or there where I dabbled with some of the earlier experiences, I did not get to fully play a Zelda game through to completion until I got Twilight Princess. And by then, I was in high school. So the story goes is that I got the Nintendo Wii at launch. I was a 12:01 a.m. purchaser. First in line and one of the first buyers worldwide. One of my friends also wanted a Wii, but they were sold out in the locations that we were lined up at, so he had to go to another Best Buy and line up overnight. I decided to line up for him because why not? We were in high school, it was a lot of fun. And he decided to buy Twilight Princess, but he allowed me to borrow the game and play it before giving it back to him. It was kind of his way of showing appreciation for me lining up with him. Now, I went into Twilight Princess with little to no expectations. Gaming for me was mostly about bright, colorful fun. The Zelda franchise always felt a little bit more serious than what appealed to me. And I was always somewhat intimidated by the potential time sink and effort required of a Zelda game. But I know that when I started playing Twilight Princess, while I initially felt like I was somewhat put off by the experience just because it wasn't the type of game that I generally went out of my way to play, I quickly found myself addicted, obsessed even. I could not put it down. Between the problem solving, even the shaking of the controller to swing the sword or bark with the wolf, some of the more serious undertones of the story, the captivating world that I had fallen into, I was just mesmerized by the experience. And as the game went on and I started to get a feel for things, I began to completely understand why people loved Zelda titles. And I started to realize what I was missing out on for all of those years. Over the next few years, I would start to revisit the older games. I never really clicked with any of them the way I did with Twilight Princess, but I don't think I gave them all that fair of a shake. It wasn't until Ocarina of Time on the 3DS came in that I completely sunk into my next Zelda experience. It's funny because it started off in the same way that Twilight Princess did. At first it felt a bit slow, it felt a little intimidating to have to go through it, to put in that much time and effort into a game. Remember, action platforming was always kind of my go-to. Mario, Sonic, Donkey Kong, those are like the franchises that defined me growing up. And even more than that, local multiplayer, that was a very big thing for me. It still is a very big thing for me. But Ocarina of Time on the 3DS completely pulled me in, and I quickly felt that same feeling that I had gotten with Twilight Princess. I was obsessed. I couldn't put the 3DS down. I was in my early 20s by this point. I was working night shift at a gas station. I would take that 3DS with me, and I must have beaten that game in only a few nights. While I had played more Zelda games in between my experience with Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, none of those experiences stood out to me in the same way that those two games did. But the day that I discovered just how much I could actually love this franchise, one that I had mostly set on the back burner through most of my childhood, was when I finally played Link Between Worlds. Link Between Worlds, until now, might be my favorite Zelda game. I'd probably change my mind a million times if I go and revisit the franchise again, but I know that Link Between Worlds was kind of the tipping point for me, where I went from liking a franchise that I would visit every now and then, to realizing that I had to play every one of these games. It's also largely the reason why I think that I favor the top-down Zelda games more than I do the 3D ones. There's a video on my Retrospective channel that you can check out if you're interested in hearing more about that. But because of how much I loved Link Between Worlds, that's when I decided to go back and start the entire entire franchise and actually give it all an honest effort from start to end. I loved all of it. I played some of it on original hardware, I emulated others where I can, virtual console, etc., all that stuff. And almost every single time I've played a Zelda game, I go into it kind of like feeling anxious about getting started, because I know that once I get sucked into that game, I'm not going to be able to do anything else. The same thing happened when Breath of the Wild came out. I loved my experience with Breath of the Wild. I realize that today people have a very different perspective of that game, largely because of what Nintendo has done since that game. But I remember at the time just seeing a giant open world where it was like you know where you need to go and you see how far it is in the distance, and it's on you to figure out how to get there. For me, that's what made it so enjoyable. I don't even think I experimented that much with the game. I didn't put that much time and effort to really screw around with it the way other people did. My playthrough was all of like 40 hours maybe, but it was more than enough. And it was such a memorable experience. So much so that I had to get Link's Awakening at day one. I think I dabbled with the original version on the Game Boy. I don't think I ever played it on Game Boy Color, but I bought Link's Awakening for the Switch largely because I was still so hyped up from my experience with Breath of the Wild, but even more so because of how much I loved Link Between Worlds, and this was the next 2D Zelda that I'd be able to get to play after playing that one. Now, was it worth $60? No. Do I regret purchasing it? Absolutely. But the game came out for me during a time where I was still very much blind towards what Nintendo was doing and what they were moving towards. In my mind, this was still poor Nintendo recovering from the Wii U, a console that I had loved, but it failed. And so I still felt like they needed to release some of these games that were low budget and get the full price for them in order to recover. This was not anything that I understood based off of research. This was just the vibe that I had gotten after going through the Wii U and 3DS generation. And just for the record, I remained blind about all of this until the Switch 2 reveal. Many arguments that Nintendo fans are still making for Nintendo to this day are arguments that I made against Sony fans probably as early as February 2025. I was already starting to kind of loosen up a bit as we got closer to the reveal because I was kind of annoyed that we were just getting a Switch Pro and not something new and unique. But that's not really part of today's conversation. That being said, Link's Awakening is a great game. It is not worth $60, especially today, but the price of the game should not take away from how fun it is. Naturally, I eventually got Tears of the Kingdom on day one. It was actually gifted to me because I had refused to spend $70 on a game, but I had a YouTube channel at that point in time and my family wanted to be supportive, so they bought it for me. One of the hardest things that I did was stop playing after 30 hours so that I could make a video on Tears of the Kingdom. I do not recommend watching that video, but it is somewhere in the archives of this channel if you're curious. I was enjoying Tears of the Kingdom so much, but I told myself after 30 hours I should stop and make a YouTube video on the game. And keep in mind, back then, YouTube videos took me so much longer to make. There was a lot more learning involved. I don't even really know how to edit as well as I do now, and I'm still not good, but I'm better than I was back then. But as soon as I did finish that video, I did revisit Tears of the Kingdom, and I put significantly more hours into that title than I did Breath of the Wild. Now, I haven't actually revisited either of those games since, and in fact, my memory's kind of fogged as to which one is which half the time. And perhaps if I ever find myself in a position where I'm a full-time YouTuber, maybe at that point in time I'll actually cover the Zelda franchise, because that would take way too long with the limited time that I have now. But when I think back to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, as gameplay experiences, I don't look at them with any bit of animosity. There is a lot of revisionism, I feel, around Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not part of that. I do think that formula has ruined and bled over into too many other franchises, and there could be an argument made about the success of Breath of the Wild kind of being part of the downfall of Nintendo. But just looking at it in its own vacuum, playing those games were some of the best time sinks that I've ever had gaming in my life. That being said, I really hope they go back to the regular formula on the next Zelda game, if there is ever another Zelda game, because at this point it's probably just going to be a simple emulated remake, or perhaps they might grace people with a Switch 2 edition of Skyward Sword and call it a day. But anyway, Tears of the Kingdom was not technically the last Zelda game that I've played. I've revisited most Zelda games, especially in the 2D ones, over the past few years, but I play them in short spurts. I jump in there, play it for an hour or two, usually put it down, forget where I was, and then I just kind of move on to the next thing. This is part of the reason why I always found Zelda games so intimidating, because I just didn't want to allocate so much time in order to fully immerse myself in those experiences. I just didn't have the time, quite frankly. But shoot, every now and then I don't mind picking up Minish Cap and playing for a few hours, seeing how far I get into it before moving on to something else. Majora's Mask is a game that I have a save file that's been ongoing for a few years now, and I pick it up once every few months and I just continue where I was off the last time I played it. I've come to a point now where I've realized that even if I was not a Zelda fan, basically a real Zelda fan through the first 20 or so years of my life, It's been long enough now since I played Link Between's World where I have felt like that I've been a pretty committed Zelda fan for over a decade. It just kind of sucks that in that last decade it's really only been Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2. But fortunately, because it is a franchise that I did not get to fully immerse myself in experience as I was growing up, I have since revisited most of those games on my modded Switch. Yeah, there's a few of them that I did not want to wait for them to show up on Nintendo Switch Online. Actually, I think it's kind of annoying because right after finishing one of the games, I think it was Minish Cap, or maybe it was one of the Oracle games, like 2 weeks later it got dropped on Nintendo Switch Online. But anyway, that's really all I got for right now. I don't think I'll ever be like the flag bearer for Zelda franchise. At this point, I doubt people want to see me even be the flag bearer for Nintendo. But when it comes to like my favorite IPs in the Nintendo world, I prefer Mario, I prefer Donkey Kong, Metroid. Obviously, it's not Nintendo, but Sonic. Most of those franchises and their mainline games are a lot more dear to me. But that doesn't mean that I don't love the Zelda games. And being a Nintendo fan and being in a position where I'm frequently waiting for Nintendo to release something new, especially in the last decade or so, even if it has not hit me as hard as most other people, I understand why people are so excited for the 40th anniversary. Or why they were so excited for the 40th anniversary. I've been there every step of the way seeing people clamor for Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, and as a Mario fan, even if I don't own a Switch 2, I'm still waiting for that damn sequel to Mario Odyssey. And it bugs me to no end to realize that that might not be coming anytime soon. Bonanza might be carrying it for another 2 or 3 years. I was in like my mid to late 20s when Odyssey came out. There's a non-zero chance that I'm not going to be playing the next mainline Mario game until I'm in my 40s. And it might be worse for Zelda fans right now because Tears of the Kingdom, which was just basically an expansion on Breath of the Wild, only released 3 years ago. It's very possible that the next Zelda game releases at the end of the Switch 2's life and at the start of the Switch 3's life. The same way Breath of the Wild completely skipped the Wii U and came out on the last day while simultaneously launching on the Switch. Sorry to burst your bubble, but we kind of already have an idea of everything that's coming out for year 1 for the Switch 2, and seeing as how underwhelming this last year was, and how underwhelming the last few years of the Switch 1's life was, I don't know how optimistic anybody that's a Zelda fan should be for what's to come. Especially because not only did the 2 3D Zelda games get Switch 2 editions, but the 2 2D Zelda games got their free performance and resolution updates. So I guess maybe we can enjoy the next 3D Zelda on the 50th anniversary in a decade from now? But I guess you shouldn't worry too much. There will be plenty of overpriced remakes and remasters until then. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you all on the next one.